If you're new to Ask Reddit cheating drama, make sure to subscribe and like the video. It only takes a few seconds, but it really motivates us to create more crazy cheating stories. This is not a story about betrayal. It's a story about what comes after, about the quiet moments when your world implodes, not with screaming, but with the sound of your own footsteps walking away. About what happens when the people you love most turn out to be architects of your undoing. And about how, piece by piece, you build something new from the ashes. This is Claire's story. But maybe, in some way, it's yours too. If you've ever been lied to, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever stood in a doorway and realized everything would be different from that moment on, this is not a revenge story. It's a rebirth. The sound of laughter was what I heard first, not the kind you hear echoing from a comedy club or a late-night movie, not carefree or joyful. This was different, intimate, hushed, playful, the kind of laughter that has no business living in your home when you're supposed to be at a gala in Manhattan. I wasn't supposed to be there. A storm had grounded all flights out of New York. The venue had canceled. I'd tried calling Ethan, but it went to voicemail. So I caught the last train to Chicago, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd surprise my husband with takeout and stories from the red carpet he didn't get to walk with me. Funny how the smallest disruptions in life can rip the floor out from beneath you. I stepped into our penthouse, silent and dim. The hallway still smelled faintly of the peony candles I'd ordered from France, the ones Ethan always blew out, claiming they gave him headaches. I kicked off my heels near the entryway, dropping my overnight bag with a soft thud on the marble. That laughter again, louder now, coming from upstairs, from our bedroom. A part of me knew it in the bone-deep way your body warns you before your mind catches up. My fingers went numb as I climbed the staircase we'd had custom-built last fall, the one Ethan had said was too extravagant for just the two of us. I remembered the way sunlight filtered through the skylight above the landing, how I used to love the feel of it on my skin in the mornings. I didn't love anything in that moment. The laughter stopped just before I reached the door. I didn't knock. I didn't slam the door open like in the movies. I just turned the handle, quietly, deliberately. And there they were, my husband of 9 years, lying tangled in the sheets with Madison Blake, my best friend from college, and Brooke Sanders, my oldest friend from high school. The three of them twisted in a mess of limbs and expensive Egyptian cotton, the same sheets Ethan had scoffed at when I brought them home, the same ones I had changed yesterday morning. My pillow cradled Madison's golden hair. Brooke's signature silk scarf, the one I'd gifted her last Christmas, hung from the bedpost like a punchline. And Ethan? Ethan looked at me with the detached irritation of a man interrupted during a conference call. "Claire," he said, voice flat, like I'd walked in while he was brushing his teeth. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I didn't answer, didn't cry, didn't scream. I took a step into the room, looked at the scene before me, these three people I loved more than I should have, and felt something in me fracture. Not with a crash, with a click. A quiet click, like a lock turning, like a door closing behind you, softly. Finally. "You're home early," Madison said, sitting up and pulling the sheets around her like that could hide anything. Brooke didn't even look at me. It was Ethan who stood, naked but unashamed, grabbing his pants from the floor. "Let's not overreact," he said, already shifting into his corporate tone. "This wasn't planned." "Wasn't planned?" I repeated, tasting the words. "It just happened," Brooke whispered, eyes glassy, lips trembling. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. I almost laughed. Just happened. All three of them just happened to fall into my bed, in my house, on a night I wasn't supposed to be home? No. I stepped back, not out of fear, not out of weakness, out of clarity. Ethan reached for me, hand outstretched in some pitiful gesture of repair. I shook my head. "Don't," I said softly. "Don't touch me. Don't follow me." I walked out of that room, down the staircase, and through the echoing silence of our carefully curated home. I paused only to grab my bag, then walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of Cabernet, and stared out the window at the rooftop garden I had designed with so much love last spring. The lavender was blooming again, purple, delicate, resilient. Behind me, I heard them coming down the stairs, Ethan's heavy steps first, then the clicking of heels. A tragic little parade of guilt and shame pretending to be remorse. "Claire, please," Madison started. I turned around. "I gave you everything," I said. "Not to one of them, to all of them. My trust, my time, my loyalty, and this," I gestured vaguely upward to the scene of betrayal, "is what I get in return?" Ethan tried again. "We can fix this. Therapy, space, whatever you need." I looked at him, at all of them, and I smiled. Not the kind of smile that means joy, the kind that means war. "Don't wait up," I said, setting the wine glass down. And then I walked out the door, not slamming it, not crying, just walking, steady and certain, into the night, into the rest of my life. I drove north for hours without a destination. No music, no GPS, just the hum of the engine and the echo of betrayal threading itself through my thoughts like barbed wire. Somewhere along the way, Chicago disappeared behind me, swallowed by distance and darkness. By the time the sky began to lighten into that pale blue you only see just before dawn, I was pulling off a country road and into a small gravel driveway beneath a wooden sign that read, "Willow Haven Bed and Breakfast, Eston, 1942. I didn't choose it. It chose me. The house was old, whitewashed clapboard with navy shutters wrapped in ivy and early morning mist. It looked like something out of another lifetime. Or maybe a life I'd once dreamed of, before boardrooms and branding meetings replaced Sunday mornings and soft things. The woman who answered the door looked like she'd been expecting me. "You look like heartbreak," she said gently, not unkindly. I stared at her, gray hair tied in a loose bun, flannel robe, hands wrapped around a steaming mug. Her voice was low, steady. She smelled like cinnamon and something older, maybe lavender or the kind of peace that only comes after enough storms. "Room's ready," she said before I could speak. "Come on in." Her name was Margot Davis, widow, former school counselor, owner of this place for over 20 years. "You need a hot shower and stronger coffee than what I keep in the guest pot," she said, as she handed me a worn brass key. Room 3, top of the stairs, lake view. I didn't ask how she knew I needed a lake view. Some people just see straight through the performance. I stood under the water for a long time that morning, letting the heat sting my skin, washing away the remnants of Ethan's touch, of Madison's perfume that still clung to my coat, of Brooke's silence, and then I slept. For 13 hours. Fully dressed, face down on the quilted bedspread, like a body thrown from a train. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I wrote. On the third day, I sat in the breakfast room with my laptop and started making a list. Things I know. Ethan has access to all our joint accounts. Madison's skincare brand launch was mysteriously funded 2 months after Ethan's bonus hit. Brooke's PR firm has been fielding calls from reporters about me. Something about creative differences and possible instability. Things I suspect. This wasn't the first time. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. Things I still have, my business for now. My client list. My instincts. Evidence, if I look hard enough. I sent a single email to Harold Green, my father's old attorney. Subject, I need your discretion. He replied within the hour. Margot never pried. She didn't ask what had driven me 6 hours north with nothing but a designer duffel and dark circles under my eyes. Instead, she brought me warm blueberry muffins and let me sit in the garden as the leaves began to turn. Broken heart or broken trust? She asked once, while pouring coffee into a chipped mug. Both, I said without hesitation. She nodded like she understood the difference. One heals, she said. The other transforms. And that stuck with me. I didn't feel like a woman healing. I felt like a woman evolving. On day 5, Harold called. I've looked into your accounts. he said. Your husband's been moving money in and out of a shadow company called Clearwater Ventures, registered in Delaware. Typical shell structure. He's done this before, hasn't he? Before me? I asked. Likely. Or during. You just didn't see it then. I had. I just didn't want to believe it. What do you want to do, Claire? He asked, his voice gentler now. There are options. Quiet ones, legal ones. We can protect what's yours if we act soon. I looked out at the lake. The reflection of the autumn trees rippled across the surface, calm but deceptive. Still waters, secrets underneath. I want it all documented, I said. Every account, every fake invoice, every transfer, I want them all. There was a pause. You're not going back, Harold said, more observation than question. No, I replied. I'm not going back. And for the first time in days, I let myself cry. Not because I wanted them back, because I knew I was never going to be that woman again. It started with an email, just one, titled simply, Subject, Thought You Should See This, from an anonymous burner account. The body of the email contained nothing but a photo. It was Ethan, sitting at a rooftop bar with Brooke and Madison, glasses raised in a toast, all smiles and sunglasses. My sunglasses. The ones I'd left behind in our bedroom, tortoiseshell Chanel frames Ethan had bought me for our 5th anniversary. The kind of detail they didn't even think about. Or maybe they did. There was no message, but the meaning was clear. We've moved on. We've won. I stared at the photo for a long time, not angry, not yet, but focused, cold, as if something inside me had finally crystallized. They thought I was licking my wounds in a hotel room somewhere. They thought I'd shatter quietly, disappear. What they didn't know was that I'd already begun collecting receipts. Harold had arranged for me to meet someone. Her name was Jessica Hale, a forensic accountant who used to work for the IRS. She now did private contract work for women in difficult transitions, as Harold put it delicately. We met at a quiet diner 2 towns over. Jessica was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp brown eyes and no patience for bullshit. I've seen this before, she said, scrolling through the files on her laptop, each document I'd forwarded her stacked in neat little folders. Diversions from joint accounts, offshore transfers, dummy invoices. Ethan's either planning for a big move, or he thinks he already made it. He thinks I'm not paying attention, I said. She smiled without warmth. Good. That makes him sloppy. Back in my room that night, I pulled out an old linen notebook, the one I'd bought during a retreat in Santa Barbara, back when I thought journaling would help with the insomnia. I'd never used it, not once, until now. On the first page, I wrote, Rule number 1, keep everything. Every lie, every transfer, every glance, every piece of the mask they dropped when they thought I was too blind to see. Then I opened my iCloud backup. Photos, voice memos, shared calendars. Ethan had never been good with passwords. He used the same 2 variations for everything. Lakeview 2020 and EC Money Tree. Subtle. I began recovering everything. Deleted texts, archived emails, hidden folders. That's when I found it. A PDF file, titled waverlyholdings.docx, tucked away in an email Ethan had forwarded to himself 6 months ago. It wasn't labeled as financial, but I opened it anyway. And there it was, a quiet little bombshell, a shell corporation, one that had been active long before we married, one connected to several real estate flips with falsified environmental inspections. And, in the metadata, Madison's name. Her LLC was listed as a silent consultant on 3 of the properties. She wasn't just a side affair, she was a partner, in more than one sense. On day 10, I received a voicemail from Brooke. Claire, I know you're hurt. I don't expect you to forgive us, but it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Ethan was lonely. You were always working. Madison and I, we didn't plan this. Can we talk? Just you and me. She sounded tired, soft, almost ashamed. Almost. I replayed the message, then forwarded it to Harold without comment. He called an hour later. I've looped in a second lawyer, he said. Her name's Dana Wolf. Corporate litigation. She'll be handling the business side. Do I need that? I asked. Brooke's trying to contact your clients. My jaw tightened. What? She's telling them you've taken a leave for mental health reasons, that she's stepping in to keep things afloat. There it was. The next domino. I didn't respond. Not to Brooke, not to Madison, and definitely not to Ethan, who'd sent a string of messages over the past week ranging from vaguely apologetic to outright threatening. Ethan. Claire, please don't do something we can't come back from. This doesn't have to get messy. Claire, if you're going to drag this into court, I promise you it'll get ugly. Remember whose name is on the company papers. Funny, he'd forgotten whose name was on the house deed. The silent investor behind his shell corporation, the woman who had built an entire brand from the ground up while he smiled for photo ops and took credit for everything she did behind the scenes. I wasn't breaking down. I was taking inventory, and soon I'd be making my first move. But not just yet. Let them relax. Let them believe they'd gotten away with it. Because when I returned to Chicago, I wouldn't be the woman who left. I'd be someone they never saw coming. I returned to Chicago on a Wednesday. No announcement, no social media post, no key in the door of our penthouse. I didn't go home. Instead, I checked into a serviced apartment in Lincoln Park. Sleek, modern, anonymous. The kind of place you rent by the week when you're in between jobs or lives. I paid under a pseudonym, booked through a friend of a friend in real estate, and made sure my name wouldn't show up on anything Ethan or Brooke could access. The woman who walked into that apartment was not the same woman who left the penthouse 2 weeks ago. My hair was shorter now, shoulder length, sharp, with a side part Madison used to tease me for never daring to try. My nails were bare. My heels were low. My expressions had edges where softness used to be. Everything about me now had a function, even my silence. Montgomery & Copium, my event agency, still stood. Barely. I hadn't made contact since the night I left, not with my staff, not with my clients. I knew what that kind of silence could do in our industry, but I also knew what showing up unprepared could cost me. When I finally stepped into the downtown office, housed in the historic Burnham building, it was 7:13 a.m. The lights were off, the space was quiet, and yet different. My assistant Emily arrived just before 8, carrying coffee and a guilt-ridden expression. "Claire," she said, breath-catching, "I didn't know you were—" "I know," I said, cutting gently but firmly. "It's okay." Her shoulders dropped in visible relief, but her eyes still darted around the office as if expecting someone to stop me. "Brooke's been managing things," she said. "Temporarily." "How temporarily?" "She told the team you needed a sabbatical. That you were—" she hesitated, "taking time for your mental health." I almost smiled, not from amusement, but recognition. Brooke always knew how to cloak betrayal in concern. It was her signature. I went straight into my office, still mine, technically, and closed the door. Then I pulled out the burner phone Jessica had given me, typed in the password, and opened the shared drive we'd been building for days. Contracts, payments, emails, proof. The first domino I'd tip wouldn't be legal. It would be reputational. At 11:00 a.m., Brooke walked in like she owned the place. She was wearing white. Of course she was. High-waisted trousers, a cream silk blouse, flawless makeup, and that fake concern expression she wore better than mascara. "Claire," she breathed, hand to her chest. "God, it's so good to see you. I was going to call—" "Save it," I said. Not cold, just done. Her smile flickered. "I know this has been complicated, but I've kept things running. Your clients are still here." "They're my clients, Brooke." "I know, I'm just saying—" "No, you're not just saying," I said, standing. "You're positioning. That's what you do." She blinked. I opened the drawer behind me and slid the folder across the desk. Inside, an itemized breakdown of every unauthorized call she made to our clients, every proposal sent under her own branding, every quote with her initials and not mine. "You've been using my company to market yourself," I said calmly. "That's fraud." "I was trying to protect your reputation." "No, You were trying to steal mine." Brooke's hands curled into fists, but her voice stayed level. "You're being emotional, Claire." And there it was. The word. Not betrayed. Not strategic. Emotional. Men use it to disarm you. Women like Brooke use it to invalidate you. I leaned forward. "If you ever use that word to describe me again, I'll sue you into whatever influencer-branded dust you came from." She stood. The mask finally cracked. "You have no idea what you're walking into," she said quietly. "You've been gone. Madison and I, Ethan and I. You all assumed I'd break." "And you haven't?" she shot back, eyes narrowing. "You're living in some rental under a fake name. That's not strength, Claire, that's hiding." "No," I said, I tapped the folder. "This is strategy, and this is just the beginning." She turned and walked out, heels clicking across the hardwood like gunshots. That evening, I sent out 3 emails to my most loyal clients. Personal, private, measured. No drama, no accusations, just, "There's been a miscommunication regarding who is and isn't associated with Montgomery & Co. I'm available for a call this week to clarify and refocus your project. I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere." The replies came within hours. "Thank God you're back. We've been waiting." Brooke didn't feel right. Neither did Madison. Neither did Ethan. And soon, neither would the ground beneath their feet. I wasn't invited to the launch party. Of course not. Madison's new beauty line, Blake by Madison, was making its debut at one of Chicago's trendiest rooftop lounges. Velvet ropes, Instagram backdrops, signature cocktails with edible gold leaf. It was exactly the kind of event I used to produce for people like her, before she decided she could become me. She didn't expect me to show up. She especially didn't expect me to show up wearing her launch color, Blood Moon, a deep wine-red lipstick she'd been teasing on social media for weeks. I'd seen the mock-ups, I'd seen the branding deck, I'd seen everything, because she'd built it using my designers, my event stylist, my mood boards. She hadn't even bothered to change the fonts. I arrived alone, no entourage, no announcement, just a long black dress with a slit high enough to whisper confidence and a calm expression that didn't match the firestorm in my chest. At the entrance, a flustered assistant checked the guest list. "I don't see a Claire Montgomery." "I'm not here for the guest list," I said smoothly. "I'm here for my work." Before she could protest, I walked past the rope. You don't get uninvited from a party that was built on your back. Inside, the lighting was moody, designed to flatter cheekbones and hide flaws, a metaphor if I'd ever seen one. Champagne was flowing. Influencers were posing in front of floral walls and neon signs that read, "No filter, just Blake." I spotted Madison near the DJ booth, mid-laugh, surrounded by photographers. She was wearing a deep red gown to match the lipstick, her hair pulled back, her skin glowing, her ego inflated like a parade balloon. She didn't see me at first, but others did. One of the photographers, a man I'd worked with a dozen times, did a double take and lowered his camera. Another stylist whispered something into a friend's ear. Word spreads fast in this city, especially when ghosts show up in stilettos. When Madison finally saw me, her expression faltered for exactly 2 seconds, then came the smile, that fake, plastic, PR-approved smile she used in brand deals and damage control. "Claire," she said, gliding over with a flute of champagne and too much perfume. "Wow, you look..." "Unexpected?" I offered. She forced a laugh. "It's good to see you out. I wasn't sure if..." "You didn't think I'd show up?" I said, meeting her gaze. "I know." Madison took a sip, trying to stay composed. "It's just, tonight's not really the time." "I agree," I interrupted. "It's past time." I handed her a sleek black envelope from my clutch. Inside, a cease and desist order, drafted by Dana Wolfe, legally notarized, with detailed exhibits showing my copyrighted designs, emails between her and my subcontractors, and side-by-side images of her original packaging and mine from last year's Valentine's Day gala. She opened it, scanned the first page. Her face paled, just slightly. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. "No," I said calmly. What's ridiculous is you using me as a blueprint for your brand and thinking I'd never notice." Madison glanced around, eyes darting. Cameras were still flashing, but they weren't on her anymore. They were on us. "Do you want to make a scene?" she hissed. I leaned in, smiling for the crowd. "Madison, darling, you already did. I'm just rewriting the credits." I turned and walked away. No screaming, no whine in the face, just the soft, precise click of my heels across the tile and the weight of her future slipping through her fingers. That night, back in my apartment, I received a call from Dana. "She's already had her attorney reach out," she said, trying to claim it was a coincidence. I laughed once. Cold. "There's more," Dana added. "We traced a wire transfer made last month. $75,000 from Ethan's Clearwater Ventures shell account directly to Blake Beauty LLC. She's not just a copycat. She's complicit." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. They weren't just cheating. They were laundering through each other. "What do you want to do?" Dana asked. I stared out the window, the skyline glittering like broken glass. "I want them to feel it," I said. "Not just in their bank accounts, in their reputations, in the circles they care about most." And this was just the beginning. Ethan always loved being the smartest man in the room. He built his entire identity around it. Tailored suits, precision speech, the watch that cost more than most people's rent. Every boardroom was a stage, every deal a performance. Confidence masquerading as integrity, charisma covering up control. And for a long time, I let him believe I was his loyal audience. Today, I was the critic. Horizon Realty's quarterly pitch meeting was always a show. Shareholders, investors, city officials. It was Ethan's favorite stage. He'd present the company's upcoming projects, parade around renderings of skyline-defining towers, and drink the applause like champagne. He didn't know that I'd been quietly handed 5 minutes at the start of the meeting. A favor from Cal Whitmore, the firm's largest investor, and my former client. He also didn't know that the project he was about to pitch, the Astor Complex, was built on fraudulent permits, falsified environmental reports, and quietly silenced labor complaints. I knew, because I had proof. I entered the glass-walled conference room at exactly 9:58 a.m. in a sand-colored pantsuit Ethan had once called too masculine for your brand. Perfect. 12 men in suits looked up, a few women, all unfamiliar. Ethan stood at the head of the table, laser pointer in hand, digital renderings glowing behind him. His jaw twitched when he saw me. "Claire," he said, voice too bright. "What a surprise." I smiled, smooth and sharp. "Mr. Whitmore invited me. I have something brief to present before the pitch." A silence fell over the room. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "This is a professional meeting. If this is personal..." "It's very much business," I cut in. "Which is why I'm here." I connected my tablet to the screen and tapped a button. The projector blinked once, then filled with a scanned document, a federal notice from the EPA, citing multiple violations tied to the Astor Complex development. Then another slide, Labor Department fines for wage violations on 2 Horizon sites. Then another, anonymous complaints from contractors. About Ethan. I turned to the room. "Before you invest in a project tied to the Astor Complex," I said calmly, "you should know it's under federal investigation. These aren't rumors. These are facts. All filed. All real." Ethan stepped forward, voice tight. "This is slander." "Claire is in possession of documentation," I said, clicking to the next slide. Emails between Ethan and a city inspector, referencing bribes masked as expedited permit fees. One of the board members leaned forward. "Are these authenticated?" I handed out USB drives with everything Jessica and Dana had compiled. "Verified by a third-party forensic firm. I've already shared these files with the authorities. I just didn't want you blindsided." Ethan's voice dropped. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Leveling the playing field," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. Whitmore stood up. "I think we need to adjourn until legal reviews this." It wasn't a suggestion. Ethan caught up to me in the hallway as I exited the building. "You've just burned every bridge we had," he growled. "No," I said, pausing at the elevator. "You burned them. I just held up a flashlight." He stepped closer, the cool mask starting to crack. "You think this makes you powerful? You think you've won something?" I met his stare and smiled, just slightly. "This isn't about winning, Ethan. It's about consequences." The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. "Claire," he called after me, voice lower now. "You're playing with fire." "I am the fire," I said, and the doors slid shut. That night, I stood in my apartment with a glass of wine in one hand and an envelope in the other. Inside, a positive pregnancy test. I hadn't told anyone. Not Harold, not Dana, not even Margot. Not yet. Because this child? This one would grow up knowing that their mother didn't just survive betrayal, she dismantled it, piece by piece. The news broke 2 days after the boardroom takedown. Whistleblower derails luxury development deal, Horizon Realty under federal review. CFO Ethan Caldwell linked to permit scandal, misuse of funds. Insiders say source may be his estranged wife. They didn't name me outright, but they didn't have to. My phone buzzed with headlines, messages, and offers for interviews I ignored. This wasn't about fame. This was about reclamation. Of my name. Of my company. Of my damn narrative. Ethan hadn't made a public statement yet, but I'd heard through Dana that Horizon's investors had frozen all new projects, pending internal audit. That was the first domino. The next one? Brooke. She was always the quiet strategist. While Madison distracted with drama and Ethan led with charm, Brooke made the real moves in the background. The whispers, the spin, the manipulation masked as logic. She was the one who planted the idea that I was too busy, too emotional, too fragile to lead after the betrayal. She didn't just want to replace me. She wanted to become me. And I was done letting her pretend otherwise. I requested a meeting through her assistant, formal, professional, under the guise of resolving business miscommunications. She agreed without hesitation. We met at the Langham, one of Brooke's favorite spots. Minimalist, sterile, expensive. Just like her. She was already seated when I arrived, her phone in hand, a glass of Sauvignon Blanc untouched in front of her. She looked up and smiled like we were old colleagues, not co-conspirators on opposite sides of a battlefield. "Claire," she said smoothly, "you look... well." I sat down without responding. "Let's not pretend this is a social call," I said. She sighed, setting her phone aside. "All right then, you've clearly made your point. Madison's panicking, Ethan's circling lawyers like sharks, but I'm not sure what you think you're going to gain from dragging this out." "I'm not dragging anything out," I said. "I'm cleaning house." Brooke arched a brow. "And what exactly do you think I've done?" I slid a flash drive across the table. "Emails," I said. "Between you and my clients. Between you and my designers. Draft contracts you sent from your own LLC while still listed as Montgomery & Company's head of PR. She didn't reach for the drive. "You're bluffing." "No," I said. "You just underestimated me." Brooke leaned back. Her composure cracked for just a moment. A flicker of something close to fear crossed her face. "I was protecting the brand," she said tightly. "You disappeared. You were spiraling." "You mean I caught my husband in bed with my 2 closest friends and didn't show up to a meeting? That's spiraling?" "Investors were asking questions." "Then maybe you should have told them the truth," I snapped. "That you and Madison were playing house with Ethan while I was rebuilding my entire life from scratch." Brooke's face hardened. "You don't want to go to war with me, Claire." I smiled. "Brooke, war's over," she blinked. "I already submitted the evidence to the Ethics Committee for the National PR Association. Your membership is under review. I've also spoken with 4 of your current clients, none of whom were aware you were misrepresenting your role at my company." She didn't speak. "You won't be blacklisted," I added, standing, "but you will be irrelevant. And that, I think, is going to hurt you more." I left her sitting there, glass still full, career crumbling, as the server arrived with the check. That evening, I walked into the office of Montgomery & Company for the first time in weeks, not as someone trying to salvage something, but as its rightful owner. Emily met me at the door with tears in her eyes. "They all want to come back," she whispered. "The clients, the vendors, everyone. They just wanted to know you weren't broken." "I'm not," I said simply. "I was building." That night, in my quiet apartment, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and rested a hand on my stomach. 7 weeks now. Too early to show. But I felt her. Her. I don't know why I was so sure it was a girl. Maybe because I already felt her fire. Like mine. Like what I had buried for so long beneath grace and patience and politeness. "You'll never have to beg someone to respect you," I whispered. "Not like I did." The letter arrived by courier. Heavy paper, embossed letterhead, formal language disguised as diplomacy. "Dear Mrs. Montgomery, we write to propose a resolution." Ethan wanted to settle. After everything, the affairs, the laundering, the lies. Now that Horizon Realty was under federal scrutiny and Madison's brand was tanking, suddenly he was interested in amicable divorce terms. Translation: he was cornered, and he knew it. I sat at the marble island in my kitchen, the same kitchen I once designed for quiet mornings with coffee and everything I thought was stable, and read the offer aloud to myself. Claire retains ownership of Montgomery & Co., pending agreement to waive spousal claim on all assets associated with Horizon Realty. They were offering me my own business, as if they could. They were offering me peace, as if that was the price. I called Harold. "You've read it?" he asked. 3 times. Thoughts?" "They're scared," he chuckled. "Terrified." "What do they know?" "Not enough," he said. "If they had, they wouldn't be offering you a clean exit. They'd be begging for immunity." I was quiet for a moment. "Do we respond?" I asked. "Only to let them know it's too late for negotiating." He paused. "You have everything in place?" "Everything," I said. Later that day, as I prepared to finalize my next statement to the press, a controlled message about resuming leadership at Montgomery & Co., I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a photo, taken just hours earlier. Madison, sitting in a cafe, holding a tiny baby bump, smiling at the camera. No caption, no sender name, just the image. The message was clear and pathetic. She wanted me to know that she was pregnant, that she'd won somehow, that her betrayal had resulted in more than destruction. It had created life. I stared at the photo for a long moment. Then I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out my own ultrasound. 7 weeks, heartbeat strong, a new beginning inside me they knew nothing about. I placed the photo beside my keyboard and got back to work. That night, I stood in front of my floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights flicker like stars caught in glass. My phone buzzed. This time, it was from Dana. "Check your inbox. Just came in. Surveillance. You're going to want to see this." I opened the email, and there it was. Footage from 2 months ago. A private dinner. Madison, Ethan, and a man I didn't recognize. But Dana had identified him. A lawyer, with ties to a trust fund, one that had recently been set up under Madison's name. That was when I realized they hadn't just betrayed me, they'd been planning a replacement life. A new brand, new money, new image. They were preparing for me to disappear. But I hadn't, and I wouldn't. I never intended to hold a press conference. I'm not a celebrity, I don't crave the attention. But in this world, one built on image and curated truths, sometimes silence looks like guilt. And I'd been silent long enough. The invitation was simple. Montgomery & Company, leadership statement and Q&A, hosted at the Langston Hotel Ballroom, Wednesday, noon, press credentials required. I wore navy, no flashy colors, no brand logos. My makeup was minimal, just a hint of the deep red lipstick I knew Madison had tried to mimic. Every detail was intentional. The ballroom was packed. Journalists, bloggers, influencers, former clients. A few I hadn't expected, including Cal Whitmore, still holding court in the back like the kingmaker he was. As I stepped to the podium, flashbulbs popped like distant fireworks. I took a breath. Then I began. I know what's been said. I know what's been speculated. Let me be clear. I did not walk away from my company. It was taken from under me by people I trusted with everything. I paused. Let them sit in it. The silence was thick. But that chapter ends today. From there, I laid it out. Clean, professional, bulletproof. How Montgomery & Company was returning to its original leadership. How contracts and copyrights had been violated. How I would be pursuing damages through the appropriate channels. And then I said the line that would lead the headlines the next morning. Forgiveness is personal. Accountability is public. That was the moment. I saw phones go up, tweets start flying. I saw the shift, the narrative moving. I didn't take questions. I didn't need to. I returned to my office that afternoon, exhausted but grounded. My team had left congratulatory notes. Champagne waited on ice. Emily had ordered my favorite Thai food and left a handwritten card. Welcome home, Claire. We never doubted you. I was mid-bite when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in years. Lauren Doyle, my former business partner. The woman who'd helped me launch Montgomery & Company before leaving the firm 4 years ago for a slower life in Seattle. I hadn't spoken to her since she left. No bad blood, just the drift that happens when lives diverge. But she wouldn't be calling now without a reason. I answered. Lauren? I'm sorry to call out of the blue, she said, her voice calm but urgent. But I saw the press conference and there's something I think you should know. I sat forward. She hesitated. I've been in contact with Jenna. I blinked. Jenna? A name I hadn't heard in almost a year. Another old friend. One I hadn't even thought to include in this mess. She and I had drifted after she moved to Miami. Her new marriage, a baby, a new business. She reached out a few weeks ago, Lauren continued. She said she had a weird feeling about something. About Madison, and Ethan, and Brooke. My pulse picked up. Claire, Lauren's voice lowered. Jenna thinks this started a long time ago, maybe even before your wedding. Everything inside me went still. Before? I echoed. There are photos, she said. Emails. She wants to talk to you. She's scared. I couldn't breathe, because somewhere deep down, I'd always wondered how early it started. How many lies had layers I'd never peeled back. The cafe was tucked between a florist and a bookstore on a quiet side street in Lincoln Square. No sign, no crowd. Just a bell that chimed softly when I opened the door, and the scent of cinnamon and something older. Something like memory. Jenna was already there. She looked different. Not older, just softer. Motherhood had blurred her edges in a way that made her seem both grounded and distant at once. She stood as I approached, eyes searching mine. Claire, she breathed, voice somewhere between guilt and relief. You came. I had to, I said, after what you told Lauren. We sat by the window. Neither of us touched the coffee the barista placed in front of us. Jenna reached into her tote bag and pulled out a folder. Worn, overstuffed, trembling slightly in her hands. I should have come to you sooner, she said. But I didn't want to get involved. I told myself it wasn't my business, that it was too far back to matter. And now? I asked. She looked at me. Now I have a daughter, she said, and I can't raise her while knowing I stayed silent. She pushed the folder across the table. I opened it. Emails, old ones, dated nearly 10 years ago, months before Ethan and I got engaged. Some from Madison's address, others from an email registered under Ethan's name, but one I didn't recognize, a private one. They weren't just friendly, they weren't even subtle. Explicit messages, plans, lies. She has no idea. It's almost funny at this point. We'll keep playing it safe until after the wedding, then start pulling her out slowly. She's too focused on the business to notice anything else. I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't an affair, this was a setup. They planned it? I whispered. Jenna nodded. I think they wanted your life, your business, your name. Madison told me once, drunk at some launch party, that you were the face. But she and Ethan would eventually be the ones behind the curtain. How did you get these? I asked. Brooke's assistant was dating a guy in IT back then, Jenna said. She backed up some files. She thought it was about business fraud, so she saved them. I didn't realize what I had until recently. I stared at the folder. Until this moment, I had believed the betrayal began that night in the bedroom. Now I realized it had started before I ever said I do. I walked home in a fog. The city seemed quieter than usual, as if the buildings themselves were holding their breath. Back in my apartment, I sat on the floor, not the couch, not the bed, just the floor. And I let it hit me. This wasn't a love lost. It was a life engineered. They had never slipped. They had schemed. I thought I was rebuilding something that had crumbled, but I wasn't. I was burning something that had been rotten from the foundation. That night, I opened the last locked file in Jessica's digital vault, one we hadn't looked at yet. It had been pulled from a corrupted archive, restored just days ago. A voice memo from Brooke. She's getting suspicious. Madison said to distract her, maybe offer her that charity board seat, give her something to chase. We only need 6 more months and the papers are ready to go. 6 more months? Papers? I checked the date. It was recorded 3 weeks before Ethan proposed to me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The voice memo from Brooke played on loop in my head. 6 more months and the papers are ready to go. 6 more months until what? Marriage? Ownership? Extraction? I wasn't sure. Until I remembered something my mother used to say. People don't betray you for love, Claire. They betray you for leverage. So the next morning, I made a call I'd been avoiding for years. Vivian Keller was my mother's best friend and the executor of her estate. She'd been there when I was born, at my high school graduation, at my mother's bedside in the final days. But after the funeral, things had grown distant. Too many raw edges, too much unspoken grief. I asked if we could meet. She didn't hesitate. Come by, she said. I've been expecting this. Vivian lived in a brownstone in Old Town, the same one she'd owned for 30 years. Her living room still smelled like orange blossom tea and paperbacks. She didn't waste time on small talk. You found out, she said as I stepped inside. I don't know what I found, I admitted, but I know it started before Ethan and I got married, and I think it has something to do with the trust. She nodded. I was afraid of that. Then she handed me a manila folder from the bookshelf behind her, old, yellowing, sealed with her handwriting. Inside, my mother's original trust documents, and a note, for Claire, if she ever needs to understand everything. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. And then I saw it. Clause 14.2, Marriage Protection Provision. The trust my mother had left me, the one Ethan had never liked talking about, included a clause that would automatically transfer advisory control of the trust to the spouse after 5 years of marriage, unless otherwise contested. 5 years. It would have happened automatically, unless I challenged it, which I never did, because I never knew. But Ethan did, because Vivian had told him. I didn't tell him everything, Vivian said, her voice shaking now. But when you got engaged, he came to me, asked smart questions, said he wanted to protect your legacy. I thought he loved you. I didn't know he was planning, I said. She nodded. He never asked for money, but he asked about dates, milestones, technicalities. The realization hit like a slow, sharp blade. Ethan married me for my inheritance, for access, for position, for control. And once he had it, he brought Madison in to slowly carve me out of my own life. It had never been love. It had always been leverage. I left Vivian's house in silence. No tears, no shaking hands, just clarity. A woman who's been lied to still asks questions. A woman who finally knows the truth? She makes moves. That night, I stood in my office at Montgomery & Company, lights low, city glowing outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. I pulled out a blank sheet of paper and began to write. File motion to freeze joint holdings. Notify trust attorney of clause 14.2 violation. Issue breach of fiduciary letter to Ethan via Dana. Draft press statement, clarifying the truth about trust and power. And finally, initiate final strike. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. It was about setting fire to the myth of Ethan Caldwell, Madison Blake, and Brooke Sanders, and walking out of the ashes with my name, my company, and my child's future intact. 3 days after I met with Vivian, the legal documents were filed. Dana handled the trust violation with surgical precision, a formal claim that Ethan had knowingly manipulated marital proximity for fiduciary gain. The phrasing was cold, brutal, precise. Harold filed a motion to freeze our remaining joint assets, citing suspicious transfers and failure to disclose holdings during a pending divorce. Jessica submitted an affidavit detailing Ethan's use of shell companies to disguise income and redirect investment funds into Madison's LLC, all linked back to the trust via timelines and IP addresses. And I drafted my final statement, not for a courtroom, not for Ethan, for the press. A controlled detonation. It was released at 8:00 a.m. on a Monday. Over the past year, I have endured betrayal, theft, and a calculated attempt to erase my life's work. I have not been silent out of weakness. I have been silent out of strategy. Today, that silence ends. Within hours, the phone rang off the hook. The New York Times wanted an exclusive. Forbes requested a sit-down. Even Vogue reached out, not for fashion, but for business. Madison's brand page went dark. Brooke's firm removed her name from their roster, and Ethan's face disappeared from Horizon's website by lunch. 3 lives dismantled in one morning. I poured myself a glass of water. Then my assistant walked in. "There's someone here to see you," Emily said. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says you'll want to hear what he has to say." "Who is it?" She hesitated. "He says his name is Jason Maddox." I froze. Jason Maddox was Madison's ex-husband, the one she barely spoke of, the one I'd met only twice, quiet, reserved, a financial analyst with no interest in the world Madison lived in. I stood. "Send him in." Jason looked older than I remembered, tired, but his eyes were clear, and in his hand was a small flash drive. "I don't want anything," he said. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I think you deserve the rest of the truth." He sat across from me, laid the flash drive on the table like it was made of glass. "After Madison left, I started digging," he said. "Not because I wanted to punish her. I just needed to understand what had happened. She'd become someone I didn't recognize." I said nothing. "She used my name to open 3 accounts," he continued. "Transferred money from her cosmetics line, which, by the way, was originally funded using assets connected to your trust, into an offshore holding under my social." I narrowed my eyes. "She framed you," he said. "But she used me to cover it." He slid a small folder across the table. "Inside are account numbers, transaction dates, copies of internal memos she and Ethan shared about contingency plans if you ever started asking too many questions." Contingency plans. I opened the folder slowly. And there it was, a document, dated nearly 8 months before I walked in on them, titled Operation Transition Details, Timelines, Brand Rollout, Messaging Strategy in the event I had to be quietly phased out. They had a script for my erasure. "Why now?" I asked Jason. "Why come to me with this?" He looked me dead in the eye. "Because they'll do it again," he said. "To someone else, someone not as smart as you, someone without the resources." He stood. "I just want them to stop." I stared down at the document. "I'll make sure they do." That night, I called Dana. "We've got everything we need," she said. "This isn't just a civil case now. With Jason's statement and those documents, this is federal." "Push it through," I said. "No settlements, no soft landings." She hesitated. "And Claire?" "Yes?" There's one more thing you should know. Madison filed for a name change last week. My heart skipped. To what? Dana exhaled. She's taking your last name, Madison Montgomery. There was a beat of silence. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was pathetic. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not physically, just emotionally, sterile, precise. Everything had the hushed reverence of a church where no one believed anymore. This wasn't a criminal trial, not yet. This was a deposition hearing, part of the ongoing civil case against Ethan, Madison, and Brooke, for fraud, misappropriation of funds, brand infringement, and breach of fiduciary duty. But it still felt like a stage. And this time, I wasn't the one being watched. They were. Ethan sat at the far table, flanked by 2 attorneys and no tie. He looked thinner, paler, still handsome in that overly polished catalog sort of way, but diminished. Next to him, Madison. Hair down, black dress, minimal makeup, a new last name that didn't belong to her, typed neatly on the court documents. She didn't look at me once. Brooke wasn't present. Her attorney cited emotional distress. Of course. I was sworn in, took the stand, sat straight-backed and still as the attorney walked me through the questions. Please state your name for the record. Claire Montgomery. And your role in Montgomery & Co. New? I am the founder, creative director, and current CEO. Can you describe the events that led to your removal from daily operations last year? I did. Clearly. Calmly. I told the truth, not the embellished, stylized version, just the truth, and somehow it felt sharper than any scripted drama could have been. I described the falsified brand partnerships, the money routed through shell companies, the silent campaign to discredit me, and the plan to phase me out using my own clients, my own connections, my own name. I never raised my voice, but I never looked away. Near the end, the opposing counsel stood. Miss Montgomery, he said, do you believe the defendants intended to harm you? I looked at Ethan, at Madison. Yes, I said. But not just me. He raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? They didn't just betray a person, I said. They betrayed integrity, trust, the idea that partnership is built on truth. And what do you want from this process? The room went quiet, everyone waiting for me to say it. Revenge, ruin, a perfect end. But that wasn't the answer, not anymore. I want them stopped, I said. Not for me, I'm already rebuilding, but for the next woman who puts everything into something and thinks loyalty will protect her from ambition dressed as love. I saw Madison's head turn, just slightly. The first crack. And I want my name back, I added, because that, in the end, was what they tried hardest to take. Not my money, not my company, my identity. After I stepped down, the judge granted a temporary injunction. Madison barred from using any variation of Montgomery in her brand or public presence, pending full review. Ethan's accounts officially frozen. Brooke's deposition rescheduled with sanctions for non-compliance. It wasn't over, but the walls were closing in. And this time, I held the blueprint. That evening, I returned home to find a package on my doorstep. No sender. Inside, a small silver bracelet. It used to be mine. I'd given it to Madison years ago, on a birthday, before I knew what she'd become. Attached to it, a note in handwriting I recognized instantly. I never deserved your friendship, but I learned from your strength. I'm sorry. Truly. I hope someday you believe that matters. M. I stared at it for a long time, then placed it in a drawer. I didn't throw it away. Not because I forgave her, but because some wounds don't get erased. They get cataloged, like scars, proof that you survived. The hearing was over. The headlines had slowed. The subpoenas had been served. Ethan was under formal investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Madison's rebrand had collapsed. The court ruled in my favor. She was barred from using my last name, my likeness, or any of my past designs in her business. Brooke? She settled privately. She handed over a public apology, a six-figure payout, and a quiet retreat to a wellness sabbatical somewhere in Napa. For the first time in nearly a year, my world was still. Dana sat across from me in the conference room, fingers laced on the table. "There's one last piece left," she said. "Criminal referral." "You mean press charges?" She nodded. "Wire fraud? Conspiracy? Intentional brand misrepresentation. You've got the paper trail, the testimony, Jason Maddox's statement. The DOJ would take it." I looked down at the file. It was all there. The power to finish it. To end their careers. To take not just their credibility, but their freedom. And I could. God, I could. Dana studied me. "What do you want, Claire?" I thought about it. For longer than I expected. Then I said quietly, "I want peace." I didn't file the referral, not because they didn't deserve it, but because I didn't want to carry them into the next chapter of my life, not even in the shadow of court dates and media soundbites. They had already taken enough time, enough space, enough me. Let the legal record show what it needed to. Let them live in the wreckage they built. I would not waste another breath speaking their names. A week later, I was walking through my garden, barefoot, coffee in hand, the morning sun catching the lavender I'd replanted, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. But this time, it wasn't Ethan. Not Brooke. Not another anonymous tip or media request. It was a name I hadn't seen in years. Ava Kendrick, my college roommate. My first real creative partner. The woman who pushed me to dream bigger than wedding centerpieces and local venues. We'd lost touch when she moved to Europe. The last time we spoke, I wasn't even engaged to Ethan yet. The message was simple. "I just saw what you did, the strength, the grace, the way you burned it all down without breaking. I'm in New York now, building something. I want you to be part of it." I stared at the screen, the breeze lifting the hem of my linen robe. A new beginning, not reaction, not revenge, creation. That night, I stood by the crib in my room, the one I'd built with my own hands, no Ethan, no friends, no audience, and looked down at my daughter, sleeping with her fist curled against her cheek. She didn't know what her mother had been through. She didn't need to. All she needed to know one day was that when the people I trusted most tried to erase me, I didn't just survive. I rewrote the story, and I did it for her, 1 year later. The air in Hudson Valley smells different than Chicago, cleaner, quieter. I've traded penthouse views and glass towers for rolling hills and cedar trees, for a kitchen that opens into a garden, for a life that doesn't need to be photographed to feel real. My daughter is 10 months old now. Her name is Isla, and she laughs with her whole body like nothing bad has ever happened in the world. And maybe that's what makes it beautiful. She doesn't carry my past. She just lives. She's the only legacy I care about now. I took the offer. Ava Kendrick's firm in New York, a design collective made entirely of women rebuilding from something. Divorces, deaths, stolen dreams. We work out of a converted firehouse in Soho. It smells like fresh paint, always. We don't talk about trauma. We just create. I consult part-time. The rest of the time, I raise Isla, drink too much Earl Grey, and sit by the window in the afternoons as the light hits the hardwood floor just right. I've made peace with what was. With Ethan's silence, he's still under investigation last I heard. With Madison's retreat, she disappeared from the internet, changed her name again, with Brooke's rebrand, a podcast about accountability that never once mentions mine. I don't need apologies anymore. Some wounds don't heal with words. They heal with boundaries, with distance, with the refusal to let someone live in your head rent-free ever again. This morning, I opened a letter from Dana. Just 1 page, formal tone. All remaining claims settled, no outstanding obligations, case closed. That was the last page of that chapter. So I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer with everything else I kept. The ultrasound photo, my original company logo, my mother's bracelet, and the final copy of the trust. Not as trophies, as proof that I lived through it, that I walked away, that I chose myself. Isla woke from her nap around noon. We sat in the garden, surrounded by the peonies I planted in spring, the ones Ethan said were too soft, the ones Madison copied for her packaging, the ones that now bloom without permission. She reached for my necklace, a small silver charm in the shape of a flame. "Fire doesn't just destroy," I whispered into her soft hair. "It clears the way." And as the wind moved through the trees and the sun painted gold onto the walls of our home, I knew I hadn't lost everything. I'd kept the most important thing, myself. Not every war is fought with fire. Some are fought with silence, with strategy, with stillness so powerful it rattles the people who tried to break you. Claire didn't just survive what was done to her. She outgrew it. She took every shattered piece and crafted something stronger, smarter, and entirely her own. In the end, what mattered wasn't what she lost. It was what she chose to keep. Her truth, her name, her voice, and the kind of power that doesn't need to shout to be heard, because sometimes the softest ending is the loudest answer.